The following is a presentation of Tuning into Sci-Fi TV, the viewer's guide to genre television.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Small Council Matters podcast. We are here for the finale, episode 6 of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. We will talk about what the morrow brings. I am joined, as always, by our maesters. Let's go around the table and introduce yourselves, please.
I'm Christine Peruski, your mistress of correction, and I will love you like a brother, or hate you like a brother.
I am Jesse Jackson DFW on X and other social media, Maester of Sunshine, Happiness, and holder of tickets for Atlanta and Austin for Springsteen Tour.
Hey everybody, I'm Shannon from out in the Pacific Northwest. I drink and I know things and I just got pregnant overnight.
And I'm Wendy, the Maester of Links. We have a few links today that we'll talk about in a moment. Just a reminder, we love to hear from you. You can send ravens, comments, phone calls. We love for you to join our Discord channel, which we have a channel specifically for the George R. R. Martin universe, and folks are talking about this episode and getting excited for new things that are coming. You can contact us on the socials at SCM_pod or at Tuning Into Sci-Fi. You can call us at 706-927-8478 and leave us a message. So before we get into talking about this finale, that was quite a gem, we have a couple of links to share. One of them is from HBO's A Night in the Making series, and it's the details for making episodes 4, 5, and 6. It focuses on the trial of 7 primarily, and it's very well done. It's probably about 15 or 20 minutes long. Highly worth your time. We also have this cool little nugget where the showrunner popped into Reddit one day and just started answering people's questions. And it was very nice to see the generally positive feedback that went his way, and also, that he was very honest with his answers to comments and questions. Some folks even pointed out a couple missed opportunities for some memorable dialogue from the novella that coulda, shoulda, woulda maybe been in the show. But all in all, it was a very fun bit of PR.
Of course, I haven't had a chance to watch the making of video yet. I probably will get to that later, now that I don't have to watch any more episodes and take notes. But I did get a chance to look over the Ask Me Anything, although this was apparently from 2 weeks ago. So all the questions are up to episode 4. My favorite question was about Makar's and Arion's personal coats of arms, how they don't appear in the show. And I love that he was so honest, because he definitely should have done it, specifically so it would have made them so easy to distinguish in the fog. So if he had a chance to go back and fix something, this would be one of them. It would have been a really simple fix. I mean, they already had to make coats of arms for them. It just would have been something different than what we got. And we had complained a bit about having trouble figuring out who was who in all that fog. So that was an interesting note. But yeah, if you want to know, if you had questions that you would have asked him, it's possible somebody asked that question.
Yeah, I didn't read the whole question answers, but I scanned it. A couple I thought were pretty interesting, comparing budgets and tone. And he was, he says, we don't have that big of a budget, which always cracks me up, because you hear of independent filmmakers making these small little films, and this is, we don't have enough. But it was very positive with it. I thought it was good. The making of had, one of the reasons I love this is they blend the behind, like talked about how you make fog And then also the personalities you get to see, and how they shared how at the end of the fight with Dunk and the Prince, they both were just like hugging each other at the end because it was such a, it's so traumatic doing that together. And it's always fun when it's someone on screen you despise, and they just in real life are just so charming and fun and like, yeah, I'm supposed to be a jerk, and talk about it. So yeah, it's definitely well done.
I generally watch the inside the episodes. There's like 3 or 4 or 5 minute things that are up when the episode airs, and the making ofs. Either they're not where I'm looking for them, or I tend not to watch them right away because I always buy, for any of the Thrones series, buy the season on a 4K Blu-ray disc. And then they have all of those in 4K or, high definition and not streaming, and I can just kind of watch them when I'm rewatching the episodes that way. So I'll probably get to that then. As far as the AMA that Ira Parker did, there were 2 things in there. Christine, you mentioned one of the things he regrets as a mistake. The second one was a line from the book that he really regretted. I've heard it mentioned that in more than one interview. But apparently there was a line when right before the tournament when he asked Steely Payne why they were supporting him. And Steely Payne says, because you're a knight who remembered his vows. Which, what a great line that is, and what a great encapsulation of what it means to be a knight. And then another question was, who's your favorite minor house? And he said Beesbury, which I thought was kind of funny because Beesbury didn't get a lot of play as a character in this, but I'm sure that means he was behind the little funeral scene with the bees in the coffin in the episode we just watched, which was kind of funny, and also led to Red explaining how they were able to do it through bee magic.
Well, not bee magic. Raymond thought it was bee magic because his brains are made of applesauce, which I thought was very funny. So fun stuff. Let's jump over now into talking about the episode and our quick review, ratings, and quick thoughts.
For some reason in this episode, they started experimenting with the music. I'm not opposed to it. Just a little thrown that they've started with the last episode. Maybe it's supposed to emphasize how different the world feels to Dunk now after all of this has happened. I don't know. I like it. I hope they keep it going in the later seasons. I would like to note that everyone involved in that fight got a limp. Every single person is limping. Apparently, the leg is a good target. I thought for a moment that the show was going to make a declaration where the books have left it vague. Was Dunk actually knighted before Sir Arlen died? They got me. I thought I was fooled for a moment. But no, we still don't know for sure. But this episode was fun. It hit all of the notes one would expect in a wrap-up episode and brought us back to the lighthearted humor that we started with. I give it 9 out of 10 weirdly appropriate pieces of jazz music.
Yeah, I guess I was just a little disappointed, though it's everything you want in a wrap-up. Maybe I was just a little sad that our time in this world has ended for this season. I wanted more, and I know we've got at least a year to wait. But there were a lot of great things, and it was good to spend time, and I was looking forward to talking to you about it. So I'm going to be a little lower, 8.5 out of 10. Final urination scenes.
Well, I absolutely adored this one. I'm going to give it a 9.4. I thought it was a delightful coda to all the carnage that we saw and heartbreak in the last one. there were so many good little character pairings throughout it, and the actors really shone. I thought it was just extraordinarily well handled. And I loved, the anachronistic music. I didn't know what was happening when the episode started and that jazz music came in. I was like, this is like a noir film or something. But apparently that's a jazz standard from 1932 called Alone Together. That this version was by Kenny Dorham, recorded in 1959. And I think just the title of it, Alone Together, set the scene for the conversation with Lionel and Dunk, both standing there, in the aftermath of the battle. And then the last one really blew my mind, because I grew up listening to music like that. I grew up in the South, and so my parents listened to a lot of country, and 16 Tons by Tennessee Ernie Ford, which, is commonly thought of as a working man's anthem, which I thought was a terrific coda to end the season on. And I loved how it played through the credits. So just a terrific season capper and a terrific season.
I agree. It was a great wrap-up episode. We handled the immediate aftermath of the Trial of Seven. We got lovely goodbye moments with most of our characters. We didn't have a Steely Pate goodbye moment, but maybe we'll see him again in the future. The music was very interesting, the two that you pointed out, Shannon, especially that one, because it is about working, but it's about also never getting ahead. He's basically sold himself to the coal mine, which is kind of depressing. But he'll have a long life, possibly. I would give this 9 out of 10 green apples for Sweetfoot. So now let's talk about some of these great details, and I'm guessing everyone's going to have more than one highlight. Maybe I'm wrong, but let's start with you, Christine.
I'm going to go light and easy. I'm going to start with that opening scene.
No!
Yes! I finally stole Shannon's scene. Because I love Sir Lionel, and he was giving perfect Baratheon vibes. I loved him standing over Dunk with the maester, just looking at him like he's some sort of puzzle to solve, and attempting to solve it with a drink. It's just so on brand. We get the knockoff maester who thinks Dunk is dying, even though he looks so much better than he did right after that fight. And Ichiar's hole is beyond your abilities. Perfect. It's in stark contrast to the promise of the Targaryen maester that came from Baelor, which I was pretty sure wasn't going to happen for obvious reasons. So Lionel is sitting there like he had a really good time at this tournament. 3 people died in that fight. Everyone else got their asses handed to them. And he declares it a wonderful tournament. And he's already moved on to what's next. Let's go hunting, hawking, let's sail, etc. While Dunk's sitting there like, do I want to live? And he's just like, it was a good time. The fighting was had. Victory was had. Let's move to the next thing. And, I love that both Lionel and Prince Maekar comment on Dunk's lack of skill, and both of them offer to train him. Like, by the way, you sucked, but we're gonna fix that. Which I actually thought was a really nice sentiment. Like, we're gonna be honest about it, but, that's fixable. We can do this. But, the talk does get serious because Dunk is in a foul mood, and he's really upset about what happened to Prince Baelor, obviously. And Lionel gets angry about it. He's saying he risked nothing, which I have to disagree with him on that statement, because the facts, they kind of back me up here. He obviously risked his life. and lost it. So, you can say that it happened because the gods don't favor a fraud. And I'm like, there's always risk. I mentioned it last episode. Even in play fighting, play jousting, there is risk. It's dangerous. And people get heated in battle, even if it's, a mock battle. Bad things can happen. I mean, they talk about how behind the scenes, people keep asking how this stuff was done and how much CGI was used, and most of it is in-camera work. And they managed to do everything we see, and nobody gets hurt, not even the horses. It's because they know what they're doing, and they're being very careful, but that's not what the goal of that Trial of Seven was. So to say that he risked nothing, I think was very callous on Sir Lionel's part, and part of the reason why Dunk doesn't want to go with him. That, and he's probably feeling very down on himself. He probably doesn't think he deserves to go with landed lord. But I love how the scene wraps up, cause Sir Lionel thinks he is gonna come with him. He's like, caravan departs after the roast. And it's hard cut to Prince Baelor's death pyre. And I'm like, this is the roast? I love Sir Lionel. I mean, he's not perfect. He can be callous, but he is pure fun.
I couldn't remember who would go first, but I wrote watching this Shannon scene. So that was a lot of fun. Yeah, this was great. And yelling at the maester, you couldn't, heal a scratchy butt. And this is actually a pretty good deal for Duncan. And I think if you think about it, right, this is what he would have wanted when he got into this, when he entered this town and this tourney, this would have, I think that would have been his goal. But I think you're right, a little bit of I don't deserve this, a little bit of do I really want to be this kind of person anymore? It gives us a little depth. I was thought of, there's an old adage that if two players, if you're a baseball scout and you watch two players run from home to first, and one of them has horrible form and one of them has good form, and they tie, which one do you draft? Well, you draft the one with horrible form, because once you teach them the correct way to run, he'll be even faster. So I think if Duncan has horrible form, but he still was able to win this tournament, the idea if we could train him, he could be very formidable. So yeah, I love this scene. It was a great way to start, them staring at him, a lot of drinking, and yes, so a few people died. It was still a good time. It isn't a party till a piece of furniture breaks. It's not a party till at least a couple of knights die.
It's not a Dothraki wedding without at least one murder.
Yeah, as y'all have alluded to, this was by far my favorite scene of the whole thing. When you have a tale like this, your favorite characters, you can't do the show without Dunk and Egg, and obviously I love both of them, and they're both cast extraordinarily well, and I'm very wrapped up in their tales. But for me, I just lit up every time Lionel came on screen. His every appearance was a scene stealer. He was amazing. Daniel Ings is a tremendous piece of casting, and he's just so devil-may-care and dashing and charismatic. So before I talk more about it, I'm just going to read some Lionel quotes from that one scene. Home is brutally dull. You could come with me. And I think that leads right out of the song I just talked about, Alone Together, because they're both sitting there, and Lionel's bored. He doesn't have any friends really to do this kind of stuff with, and they shared a traumatic experience. And Jesse, as you mentioned, Dunk would have sold his soul at the, beginning of the tournament to have this opportunity in front of him. But now with everything that's happened, he doesn't know if that's what he wants to do. And Lionel says, we'll hunt and hawk and sail, make merry. I'll sharpen that iron of yours so you don't make such a grand fool of yourself next time. And then, and all this time Dunk is not talking. And the maester says, he's dying. I can't do anything for him. And Lionel's quote is, an itchy asshole is beyond your abilities. Be gone, witch. F off with you. And then the maesters shoot away. That just cracked me up. And then come with me to Storm's End and I'll love you like a brother. And if not, well, F you. I'll hate you like a brother. F you. And then the conversation takes a little bit of a turn. And when Lionel says, you've done the realm a kindness, you'll see that one day. The only good dragon is a dead dragon. Again, that speaks to some of the, we acknowledge the PR problems the Targaryens have now that they're out of their dragon era. That people are, even though, Daeron II is a good ruler, the Targaryens haven't always been good rulers, and their bloodlines have not always been the kindest or greatest people. See, Aerion and Daeron, especially Aerion, And then after he says well, I'll get to that in a second. So then they talk about the only good dragon being a dead dragon, and Dunk takes a little bit of umbrage to that. And I loved Lionel's speech, when he says he fought for me. Lionel gets irritated. He's like, I fought for you. Harding, Beesbury, the effing Apple Boy, we fought for you. Your prince fought for you against men sworn to protect him. He risked nothing. And the gods don't favor a fraud. Which, given what we know, that line also hits hard for Dunk. There's a dual meaning in that too. And he's thinking like, why did I survive? And he kind of echoes that later with Maekar too. Why did I survive if I'm a fraud? If he's thinking he's not a true knight at that point, or his ruse or pretending wound up getting the great Baelor Breakspear killed. And then his last thing, there's a war coming, which is true and prophetic in many ways, more than one. And he says, we could be a force, you and I. You'll consider it? He doesn't say anything. Good. Caravan departs after the roast. And then, like you said, that hard cut, Christine. That scene was poignant. It tied into the character histories. There was a little bit of foreshadowing, though it wasn't hanging a lantern on it or being too obvious. It was full of humor and character and personality, and told us both a lot about both of the people in that conversation. I just adored that scene. It's one of my favorites of the whole season.
Yeah, I agree, Shannon, that Lionel is probably the breakout character of the story besides the two leads. Every scene he's in is enchanting to watch, which is why I'm still kind of angry we didn't get to see him fight anybody in the trial the prior week. Especially in the behind the scenes, the actor talked about how heavy and unwieldy the horns were for him to wear. He kept on falling back off his horse. So I would have loved to have seen a little bit more of him on screen during the Trial of Seven. When it opens with that jazz horn that is both sad and hilarious at the same time to start the scene, and how they're looking down on Dunk, and he's in abject misery, right? He feels terrible. 3 people are dead, including the guy who was supposed to be the best king ever about to come on. So he doesn't feel like he deserves to live, let alone get his nightly reward of a job with one of these lords. And he almost seems he wants to reject the kindness that Lionel's offering him. Now, I'm not sure he's as much of a partier as Lionel is either, but I love the whole part of that scene, because he starts from just appealing to him as this tourney was a great time. Let's keep having fun together. We'll go on grand adventures. And then he talks about, Baylor brought this on himself, which, to Christine's point, I don't think that the gods were necessarily not favoring Baylor because he ignored the inherent danger of jousting. He thought he, basically had this thing in the bag because he had 3 people that were supposed to, sworn to not kill him. So he forgot just how, in general, jousting is really dangerous, because Makar did not plan to hit him with the mace. He was trying to hit Dunk with the mace, is what he said later. He didn't want to do that either. And then when he talks about the war's coming and I'm going to need you on my side, I left that feeling like they're still going to have a continued positive relationship in the future. I don't know if we'll ever see him again, but I hope that they are brothers in arms in a loving way in the future. Great choice, great start to the episode. Okay, Jesse, where are we going next?
Hey folks, pardon the interruption. This is Brent from the editing booth. I just wanted to let you know that we had a technical problem with Jesse's recording. It just didn't record any audio from this point forward, so you won't be hearing from Jesse again this episode. I just wanted to let you know. Back to the show.
Yeah, the one with Valor, we didn't really get to see Valor that much. We got to see him enough to recognize his armor, so we would know what was up when Baylor put it on. And then we saw Arian taunt him that one time standing outside the tent. But that's really the first kind of, discussion we've had with him at the funeral. And he, much like Darren in a later scene, Darren is just drinking himself to death because he constantly feels sorrow because of the visions. But Valor is like, why did this have to happen? He just lost his dad in a brutal and awful way. And like you said, Jesse, they don't blame Arian for, assaulting Tansel, or, they think he should just allow them to take his foot in his hand, and just be done with it. And that leads into that part of the scene with Makar that you were talking about, where, Dunk is just racked with guilt, and he's like, I prayed or thought under the tree, like, is the life of a prince worth a hand or a foot? And then Maker's like, so what did your tree tell you? Just as snide as possible. And he's like, what if that foot means something one day, in the bigger picture? And he's trying to make sense of it himself. They're 2 heartbroken men sharing a lot of grief in that room, for the same and very different reasons. And I think despite all of that, Makar showed a side that I didn't know that he necessarily had, when he's like, he'll only squire for you, and another, hey, you suck, my men will train you, offer, and you can live at Summer Hall. And again, as we talked about with Lionel, when he started this adventure, I'm going to go to the king's summer home and be a knight and have a squire and be trained by the best available, and probably not want for food or money or whatever. But he's still deep in his feels at that point. And he turns it down. And that scene also had the benefit of, we saw Egg eavesdropping, and then it leads to their little scene, together after that. So I thought that was a good exploration of grief, and people really struggling with what to do after the events of that Trial of the Seven. So good choice.
I've commented before about Dunk's everyday bravery, and here again we get him being a true knight, doing the everyday hard things. It was very brave of Dunk to go to the funeral and speak to Valar, even though he feels responsible for all of it. And yeah, the prince was kind of hard on him, but I mean, he just lost his father. And I think he was actually pretty gentle in his delivery of it, considering the pain he's in right now. And I honestly think that scene went the best way it could have, that the conversation went the best way it could have. And despite the ending of it, I think if they were to cross paths later on, Prince Villar would be more favorable to Dunk because of this conversation, because he came and he presented himself for whatever he might have received. And then we get Prince Maker, who, of course, is very bitter about all of this, but I think he's more reasonable about the situation because he was actually the one who landed the blow that killed his brother. Whether he was aiming for him or not, he is the one who killed him. And so he knows what's going to come of that. He knows how everybody's going to whisper behind his back about what really happened. And of course, he knows Dunk's going to get the same. And he knows Dunk's not really responsible for all of this. He almost acknowledges that Arion is the cause of all of this by saying that he's sending him to the Free Cities. And I hope that a few years there will do him better. And I'm like, I don't know that something like that is going to fix this kid. Honestly, what they need in Westeros is some therapists. I think that might really help a lot of people, but you got to give it to Maker for trying, like trying to do something and acknowledging that his son is a problem. So I don't know. I think both of these conversations went the best way they could, and I think Dunk is the better man for it. And regardless of how they turned out at this moment, I think later on having these conversations will have done him good.
Yeah, this is a great choice, Jesse, because Dunk is the only one who goes to the funeral besides the Targaryens and their Kingsguard. And later on, when he talks with Raymond's like, "You really went to that funeral?" And, the conversation did go as well as it could, especially with Villar, because he isn't immediately blaming Dunk for what happened. He talks about, why did the gods spare you? So there's still a level of acknowledging that it's not entirely Dunk's fault, even by him. And I agree, they don't blame Arion enough for bringing this all on, because if Arion had just fought Dunk in a regular trial by combat, none of this would have happened. And then when Dunk does go talk to Maekar, and they have a little, back and forth, where at first, Maekar's grieving. He's also recognizes that he's going to be called a kinslayer for the rest of his life. And Dunk talks about, the idea that someday the realm may need his hand or his foot one day. And Maekar's quite skeptical of whether, one hedge knight is really worth his brother, the prince's life. He says something like, there's as many hedge knights as hedges around. So whatever makes Dunk special isn't acknowledged or recognized at this point. And Maekar points out, you need training too. You can get training and you can help me out with this kid, because he's my last shot to not have an evil screw up as a kid. And he really wants something positive for Egg. And that was so bittersweet when that's followed by Egg listening to this and hearing Dunk reject it, saying, I'm done with princes. And Egg is interpreting that personally, that he's rejecting him, and that isn't what he is doing. He's rejecting this whole idea of what noble life is like, right? When he comes back and says, later, I'm done with princes. I'm done with the way you all interact. And later he comes back with his offer to be a hedge knight instead and go on the road because he recognizes that might avoid the corruption that happened inside Summerhall. So really nice choice, Jesse. Thank you. Okay, Shannon, you didn't get your number one pick. Who are you drafting next?
Well, I'm just going to recite every line that Lionel Baratheon has said for the entire show. Hold on. Okay. No, that was my number one pick. But there's another one that's kind of an inverse of what Jesse just did. So we had the little scene with Darren when he sees him at the Beesbury thing. So, we talked about Dunk being the only one to show up at the funeral pyre. Well, Darren shows up at Beesbury's, which that was the only Targaryen other than Egg to really do that. The thing I think about that scene is, he's kind of responsible for it too. And he's definitely in his feels, but he always is because he's burdened with this prophetic dreaming and just being a drunk. But when they get on the subject of him being he's talking about he didn't start out bad or being a monster or whatever. And then Dunk tries to defend Egg's honor. He's like, no, he was a good boy. He's not a monster. And Arion's like, no, and Darren is like, I was just talking about Arion. But I guess it could apply to Egg also. I'm sure we'll make a man out of him soon. Which I think that was when the light bulb went off over the head of Dunk. Because he was just feeling so sorry for himself and depressed and I want nothing to do with princes. But that spurred him, and that leads into the second scene with Maekar when he comes back and says, I've thought about your offer, but I want to be a hedge knight, and I'll take him as my squire, and I'll train him the way Sir Arlen trained me, and we'll sleep in inns and with kindly knights and lords, and we might have to eat salt hard beef and all this. And then Maekar doesn't quite know what to make of it other than, my son is not going to live as a peasant. And he's put off by that. But Christine, you talked about Dunk's bravery showing up in other ways. I thought Dunk was particularly brave here when I can't remember the exact words, but it was like Darren never slept in a ditch. Nor did Arion eat beef that wasn't thick and rare and bloody. Basically, he's saying, you screwed up your other kids by keeping them in the trappings of the king and the Targaryen wealth and family, and look at how they turned out. He didn't say that directly, but it was about as close as you can, which, a king could, or an heir to the throne could take your hand for that. But it made him think, and then the scene was left as Maekar says no. And Dunk felt like he gave it his best shot, and said, I do care for the boy and I do want to train him and I want him to be raised right. So there's still some question, I thought, until the end. It was like, oh, did Maekar change his mind? And apparently in the book, it was more clear that Maekar did give him his blessing. But as we saw in that last scene, apparently he did not, which is great and just shows the little schemer that Egg is and has always been. But I thought that scene was very character revealing for Dunk. And then also the last thing that Maekar said was, he's my last son, which was so sad because he's lost Arion because he knows he's a complete a-hole and he sent him off to the free cities. He knows Darren is a lost cause because he's a drunk and a dreamer and, like that. Aemon, by all accounts, a lovely person, but he wanted nothing to do with it and wanted to be a maester. So it truly is his last son. And he has to think, will he turn out like the others if he stays here? But he doesn't want him to live like a pauper. It's a great character revealing scene for both of them. And I really loved that.
So I absolutely loved Daeron showing up at the funeral of the guy we saw nothing of in the fight. Very interesting coffin, by the way, with the bees and the conversation about how they get it done. Lovely, interesting traditions going on in Westeros that have nothing to do with the main story. Good flavor. But yeah, it was a nice juxtaposition to Dunk showing up to the Targaryen funeral. We get a Targaryen at, the lower lord's funeral. And you see some of the cleverness that we've seen from Egg from him, where he uses sort of side talk to get his point through to Dunk. Like, my brother wasn't always a monster, and he's like, you're not talking about Egg. Egg's a good boy. Oh, yeah, no, I wasn't talking about him. Oh, but, we could get there. Just give us time. And, I honestly thought they cut away from that too fast to go straight into Egg doing something dark. Because I thought what we needed was a little more of the gears turning for Dunk. Because he is a good person, but he's a little slow on the uptake. And I wanted to see the gears turn just like 2-3 seconds. And, but I think they really wanted to go for the cut from Daeron saying he liked fishing. And then we cut to a fish on a plate with a knife in it. So they really wanted that cut, and I think lost a good character moment that didn't need a lot of time. But when Dunk comes to talk to Maekar again, this is where the prince gets super classist. I mean, he had no qualms with Dunk training his son as long as he got some training himself. Like, listen, I'm going to give my son what he wants, and here are my parameters for it. Whatever he wants. But then Dunk comes back and is like, listen, you tried this before, and look what happened. If you want me to train him, I'm going to train him my way. But the idea of him sleeping in ditches, in stables, and eating hard salt beef, which there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, sometimes you crave some jerky, okay? It's just, it seems like considering what Egg has been through the past week or so on his own, and what that's done for him to say, no, I don't want this happening. He was so reasonable to me in that first scene, and it just got thrown right out the window for comfort. And it feels like there's this very powerful subtext here about what money and power does to people, and how little they actually mean, what's important in life, and what these things can do to ruin your perception of that. And they manage it in such a short amount of time. This episode felt really short, and these scenes felt really short, but they give us so much information. It's so much to think about in them. These are good scenes as well. I mean, there really isn't a bad scene in this episode.
Yeah, this is a great choice. It says a lot about Daeron that he showed up at the funeral for Beesbury. I'm thinking it was mostly to talk to Dunk and no other reason. But maybe to get some beer while he was there, get a drink as well. But I like that he again is sticking up for Egg, and he doesn't say it, but it was clear that he's had visions about what this kid could possibly become. And I didn't need Dunk to need much more, because he already himself understands how corrupted these houses are. So he just needed that little reminder from Daeron about, yeah, Arion was a good kid who liked fish too. And, it just takes enough time to be in this place before Egg will be like the rest of us. And then Shannon didn't start out with this scene, but then when we do cut to Egg, that fish has been stabbed with that knife multiple times, and that's the knife he chooses to go and stab his brother with. So we already know that Egg has some impulse control, if not deep-seated anger. He wanted his brother to die in the joust. So Arion, talks about the seeds of madness are sown in the womb. These seeds have already started to take hold, potentially, in Egg. And it was beautifully played when he goes into the room and his eyes are tearful, but he's still coming there to kill him. And his father, he doesn't, say, "What are you doing with that knife?" He just walks up to him and puts his hands on his shoulders to comfort him. He doesn't, so the father is clearly in over his head, but he doesn't recognize his own privilege, as Jesse mentioned about, you mean there's gambling going on? Because he thinks when he offers to Dunk, you can be his squire, or you can be he'll squire for you, and our Maester at Arms will train you up. And, to him, that's clearly the one right path to take, is to join Team Targaryen and become part of the fold. And it does not occur to him at all that there's another way that might be better. And by the way, your kid has run off before, so why don't you have somebody on him 24/7 for him to not run away again, or have a nanny or something? When we had the tag at the end where and I knew when Egg showed up, I knew his father didn't change his mind. I knew he was lying. And I'm assuming they chose to make that change from the novella for a future payoff where Maekor does change his mind and agree to him being the squire. But at that point, I was like, how old is this kid? He's supposed to be 9 or 10 years old. He should have a nanny. Like, why doesn't he have somebody who's minding him? So, in any case, great choice. Makor's a very flawed character, but they've made him very interesting and sympathetic. He's kind of accepted the machine that he's part of, and he'll only sort of think within the confines of I'll call it the Targaryen propaganda about how things should go. He doesn't seem able to just focus on I'll call it first principles, the way that Baelor could, and I think back to the scene where, Arion pulls out the rule book and says trial by 7. And when someone says, yes, the Andals brought it, he's like, if the Andals brought it, it's okay. He doesn't really question it, at all. But he's tragic and empathetic. He is a father who loves his very bad children, and at the same time takes almost no responsibility for why they're bad. Okay, so what have you left me with? I am going to go with all of the Sir Arlen lovely flashbacks, including the story of the penny and the penny tree. And him presumably on his deathbed talking to Dunk by this same tree that we've seen in his memories over and over. And Arlen is telling him that in the town that he came from, which was called Penny Tree, there was a beautiful tree in the center of town, and young men, when they went off to war, the banners were called, they would nail a penny into this oak tree. And if you returned, you could take it down. And it was very difficult to find any spot to place a penny. So he clearly understood the high cost of war. And Dunk asks him why he didn't knight him. And Arlen seems to go into a coma, a heart attack, a pause. He's definitely out of it for an extended period of time. Dunk thinks he's dead. He starts weeping, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, maybe he had a dream where somebody yelled, "Get up" at him, and he snapped back into our consciousness. And he finishes his story by saying, and that's why it's called the penny tree. And a true knight always finishes a story. And that seemed to be another impetus for why Dunk was willing to go back and offer to let Egg be his squire. It was also just beautifully played. The very tender relationship between Dunk and Arlen, I think, has been really beautifully developed over this season. And I think Sir Arlen didn't want him to be a knight because he understood, you're a lot better off being a farmer. You're probably going to live if you're a farmer. And so far, things haven't gone that great for Dunk on his knight path. And then at the very end, when he and Dunk are on the way to presumably Dorne to find a good puppet show, I loved the image of them walking down the road and Sir Arlen on Sweetfoot, takes a turn off into the hedges. It was just such a beautiful conclusion to this whole arc of Dunk actually becoming a knight. He's actually achieved all of the ideals of what a knight should be, and he's demonstrated them. And he's done it on his own terms. It's been pretty messy, but he's done it. And so, kudos to Sir Arlen and what he tried to do. I think that's also a character that could have been not nearly as rich as he was. And I feel for him. I miss him the way that Dunk does. So kudos, show, for developing that character.
I really like how this show manages to explain things without explaining things. And the first episode, when he's explaining to the master of the games about Sir Arlen of Pennytree, and he shows him the sword, there's his penny right there. It seems like just a blow-off comment, but he actually expects that this man knows what he's talking about when he says, there's his penny. That he probably expected that man to know what that penny means, what the penny tree is. It's probably something that people, at least in the general area of that town, know about. It's probably a well-known bit of lore. And we don't get to hear the explanation of that until the other end of the show. And it's not even that long of a story that Sir Arlen tells. It's not even a complete story. It's just, you put a penny on the tree before you leave, and if you manage to come back, then you get to take it down. And well, the tree's full of pennies, and it's hard to find a place to nail a penny in. Well, that tells you how often people come back. So, and they don't even explain that. You pick up on it. And it's so short of a story. And this is where I had my fake out moment, where it's like, see, there it is. He just asked him why you never knighted me, and then he died. So there's our answer. Oh, nope, he's back. And we cut the scene before he dies again. Okay. So, you had me, show. You had me. But I agree with Jesse from before. It doesn't matter if he's been knighted. He's a better knight than any of them. And I do like that he decides to nail up that penny in his tree. I don't know that it's going to take off as a tradition or if he'll have any reason to come back, but it's there. And I wonder with Sir Arlen going off to the left at the end of the episode, if that's a comment on whether or not we'll see any more flashbacks of him. I think Dunk has moved on from being so very attached to Sir Arlen. I think he had his moments. He got everything he needed from the training with him, all the wisdom he got from him, and now he can move forward and make his own wisdom. So I think that little sign off was the last we'll see of him. We'll see next season. You know, we got a year, but they're already working on it. Can I just say I love the idea of the leave a penny, take a penny tree?
Absolutely. I think you guys have summed up the Arlen stuff quite well. I will say when I was watching it for the first time live, and I'm writing notes on my little pad here while I'm still looking at the screen, I wrote, not a knight, cannon. And then there's that long pause while he's unconscious and then he pops back up, and then I just scratched right through that. As Jesse said, there's a slight chance. I mean, you could tell by the scene and the cinematography and everything else, that was the location and the day that he died. But sometime between him saying, finish the story and his actual death, he could have knighted him. Or he could have said, I mean to knight you. There's 1,000,001 things that could happen there. So I think they're leaving it tantalizingly open-ended, even though I think I know where, I think I can see where the producers' heads are at, and that they're going to make the story, like all through Game of Thrones, Brienne acted as a knight with honor and everything, but she didn't officially become a knight until the coincidentally titled episode, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. So then it was official because somebody touched you on the shoulders with a sword. So the question we've been asking all season is, what makes a good knight? What is a knight? And I think the show wants to say it's living up to the vows and the knightly ideals rather than just the ceremony. Now, is that official or not? George has never said. It's not in the text. And the show, I think, gave a clever wink to that because we all fell for it. And I laughed out loud when he popped back up. That was so fun. And I also echo what you guys said about the last scene. I'm man enough to admit that I got a little misty when I saw that third horse. And I was just like, and then just after he does that sharp turn left to go out, you can see Dunk give a little look to the left and then look back and focus on the road ahead. So I don't know if they can resist bringing the flashbacks back. I don't think narratively they need to do it, because it's like I've learned all the lessons that I can from Sir Arlen, and I'd made a decision to go forward and do what's in my heart with this squire to live up to the ideals of being a knight. Although I would not be disappointed. I don't think it would ruin that lovely, lovely ending if there was a little more comic relief, that he could bring. But if that's it for Sir Arlen, what a way to go. Just that was a beautiful way to end it.
Yeah, in the making of, they actually talk about the actor who played Sir Arlen, and he knew combat fighting for years, and the stunt coordinator talked about how he really appreciated everything he brought to the fight scenes that he did, especially the one in the flashback in the penultimate episode. It was really wonderful to hear the actor talking about, his part in the story. I would be okay if he came back, not just for comic relief. I really would need it to have a point that tied to maybe something that Dunk might be struggling with. I don't know that I would love it if he just came back for comic relief. But he definitely served us well. I did read on one podcast, or listen to one podcast that speculated whether Sir Arlen had ever been knighted as well. And maybe that was why he chose to stay a hedge knight, was because he understood the corruption of the nobles as well. So, do we have more highlights that folks want to touch on?
Well, I want to do one more comment about why he would choose not to knight him. Wendy, you said maybe he thought he would do better as a farmer. And my thought is, that's not fair, because you did not train him in how to do that. He's been trained all these years in squiring and how to be a knight. So you've left him with only one path. So, and I think the speculation is that maybe he didn't knight him because either he wasn't knighted himself, which I had thought as well, or maybe because he knows he'll be a better knight if he's not actually knighted. Because they all get big heads. They all seem to be pretty full of themselves, and I like that. So, moving on, I think one short and sweet scene that we have to talk about is Dunk and Egg off on the road again. And I'm going to leave the discussion of the 9 kingdoms to Shannon, because he will have some good lore on that. I do like establishing the power dynamic, Dunk telling him that he's to call him sir, and he's not to be on Thunder unless he puts him there. And the discussion of where they're going, I love that Egg suggests going over the Red Mountains. Dorne is lovely. I hear they have good puppet shows, which is just a wonderful little camaraderie moment for them. And it makes me hopeful that we'll see her again, Tenzel. And I do hope they go to Dorne, because I like Dorne. And I think him in that environment would be an interesting story. They're very different down there.
Yeah, on your, I love that as well. The stories that we're adapting that are known, there are 3 of them. And then Ira Parker has said George gave him 10 to 12 others. So even if they don't necessarily go to Dorne in the material that's published, there's certainly opportunity for them to get there. And, so I would welcome seeing Tenzel again. And I think we said this back in our Game of Thrones podcasting days. If we could live in any one of the 9 kingdoms, personally, I mean, I would choose Dorne every day. This seems like a lovely place. I certainly wouldn't choose the north, just because of the cold. And Dorne seems, more my style. But about that comment, that's something that, I've thought about for a while, and it's been a debate among fans. But the essence of it is, when Aegon landed and began his conquest of Westeros, there were 7 kingdoms. There was the North, the Mountain and the Vale, the Islands and the Rivers, the Rock, Casterly Rock, the Reach, which is Highgarden, the Storm, and Dorne. So there were 7 kingdoms. So how do you get from 7 to 9? Well, you add an 8th because Aegon built King's Landing and formed the Crown Lands, which weren't there before. And think of the Crown Lands kind of like Washington, D.C., but it was its own area that they carved everything around King's Landing to become the Crown Lands. And that gets us to 8. And then the other was the Islands and the Rivers were by House Hoare, Hoare, and they were the ones who built Harrenhal. And they resisted Aegon, and then Aegon went there, and they did a siege, and the long and short of it is the Black Dread Balerion burnt that stuff down. And they killed everybody there. So that's why Harrenhal got its reputation as a haunted place, and people say you could still see stone melted because it was so hot. And then they split them out. So then it became the Riverlands, And then the Iron Islands became an extra. And that's how you get the 9. And then Aegon granted the islands to the Greyjoys with the stipulation that they not raid and loot and pillage anymore, which we saw how well that held up, especially after the dragons left town. So that's how you went from 7 to 9. Now, why they kept saying it, that's how it was referred to for the longest time, was the 7 kingdoms. And I think it ties in with the religion, the aspect of the 7, 7 gods, and it just became convenient. And people kept saying it, even though nobody bothered to count them up, except our darling Egg, who was being a perfect little smartass there. And I thought it was very smart. So, I expected that from Egg once he brought it up. Is like, yeah, of course you would say that. That's so fun. And also I think he knows he has a lot to learn from Dunk, but he also likes to poke him a little to say, I'm the smart one here, just to try to add to his value in that partnership beyond just, can I feed the horses, sir, or whatever. So I thought that was a lovely little scene at the end, and that's the 7 versus the 9.
And I would like to point out that we are still the United States, although we have several territories that are not states. We have not changed our name to the United States and Territories. So names can last longer than their original intention.
I loved when he says there are 9 kingdoms, and Doug says, are you mad? And he says, is that relevant? Which I tied back to Darren's comments earlier that when Egg looks in the mirror, he's very self-aware that he has this in him. And I kind of interpreted the choice of the music at the end as, it's a sunny road right now, but it's a long road and there's a lot ahead. I love that he suggested going to Dorne, though, and going to the puppet theater. They don't hurt little girls in Dorne, is what we learned from Game of Thrones.
But we also learned from Cersei that they hurt little girls everywhere.
That's what Cersei says, yes. But so that was a great scene. Are there others folks want to touch on? I have one, if you guys don't.
I wanted to give a little shout out to our boy Raymond Fossaway. Had 2 lovely scenes. That was great. It was fun seeing him so smitten. And at the beginning of that, when Dunk gave him a hug and they just lingered on it, and you could tell it was so genuine and such friendship, and they've been through so much. And then he's complaining that his cousin, Sir Stevron, took the whole camp and whatever, but he already got a shield with a green apple on it, which was nice. He got a wife, got her pregnant apparently, just instantly. And then, so there was the comedy and the sweetness of that. And she genuinely seems into him too, which I think is nice. He proved himself in battle, proved himself a good knight. This is his first day as a knight, really. So he stepped up. And then that lovely little scene when he brings him, Sweetfoot. Yeah. And like the idea that Raymond did that for him to bring it back was touching and lovely. But then Dunk thinks about it and then gives her to Raymond. And it's like, I bet, she'd love to eat apples all day. And of course, because he's a Fossaway, he has an apple right there in his pocket. And then he feeds one to Sweetfoot, and what a lovely little touch that was.
I really like that in an earlier episode, Raymond catches Dunk talking to the horses and goes, are you talking to the horses? That's weird. But the moment he hands Sweetfoot over to him, he starts talking to her. And I'm like, oh, that's perfect. This is such a wonderful little send-off there. And I loved the subtext of the scene with Lady Rowan, which, by the way, is the name of a tree, and he's going to have an orchard. Which I don't know if they did that on purpose. But as he's introducing her to Dunk, he's like, yeah, like, the look on his face is, I already know her. And she's like, nice to meet you. Knowing, nudge, nudge. And he's like, well met, Lady Rowan. Yeah, like, okay, I'll just let him have this. I'm not gonna say anything. Cause I didn't think it was possible for someone to be slower on the uptake than Dunk, but here he is. Like, we had a night and now she's pregnant. Like, damn, in those days with, their limited technology, she just knows this. Yep. Men will never be fully educated on a woman's body.
Yeah, this was really sweet. I did love that, Raymond holds on to the hug a little bit longer than Dunk is like, all right, we're done. And then when he meets Raymond's wife, he was clearly, shocked, flummoxed a little bit. But he sees how happy his friend is, and he's like, I'm not going to get in the middle of that. And I loved when he gave the horse to him, because I think he felt bad about selling the horse and didn't want to put the horse through any more, hard times. This had been a loyal horse to Sir Arlen. So I think that it was actually very kind of him to, give the horse a happy retirement. And Raymond seemed genuinely surprised that the horse liked him. So that was a very, very sweet scene. Are there other scenes we want to shout out?
There was one little thing I noticed on my second viewing, and I don't know whether it was an actorly choice or a director choice, but when Egg was there with the knife staring at Arian, and Makar walks in and he drops the knife and he comes up behind him and he puts his hands on his shoulders. Egg does this slight lean back into him, And it was just, we rarely see moments of tenderness like that. But I thought that was just an excellent choice, whether Dex was told to do that or he just did that as an actor's instinct. I thought that was a nice little choice there.
Yes, very lovely. I can't wait to see where this kid goes, That he does seem like one of the ones that's just gonna, like, make a full lifetime career out of this.
Yeah, no, it was him, being vulnerable with his father, and we haven't ever really seen him and his father have a conversation. So we don't know too much about their relationship, really. But it's beautifully played, so thank you for pointing that out. One thing I did want to point out, Jesse talked earlier about we could have, short takes around Westeros as a series, and one of them could certainly be conversations with your horse. I loved when Dunk is talking to Chestnut and he's like, I don't know where we're going. Stop asking me. I would love that. I love that they continue to show Dunk having those relationships with animals around him. And hopefully that will continue.
Yeah, like when we first saw him, when he tells the stable boy, who we realize was Egg, he's like, be sure to give her an apple, and so that kind of comes full circle with her going to the green apple, environment. And I guess what he said his dad wanted to do was expand the cider business. So yep. Obviously that'll be a great place for the horse. And there was a nice little full circle moment.
Yep. Yeah. He's got a fine future and a loving wife, and we'll see what his children look like soon. Their firstborn, anyway. Are there other thoughts, comments, questions we want to talk about? Okay, well, I think we're going to wrap it up for this particular episode. And before we go, I want to thank everyone for listening. We really appreciate it. And I want to thank our maesters, Christine, Jesse, and Shannon, for a lot of fun time talking about this lovely, I'm just going to use that word lovely, story set in Westeros. And we will talk to you again soon.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
See you in Dorne.
We'd love to hear our listeners voice thoughts and send us feedback. Call us at 706-927-8478. Stop by our tuningintoscifitv.com blog to record a SpeakPipe message, or check the show notes and leave us comments. From the blog, you can also find links to forum discussions and subscribe to our RSS feed. Call into our Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV Skype account and leave us a message. Be social with us on our Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV Facebook page, or follow us at Tuning Into Sci-Fi on Twitter.
You've been listening to Small Council Matters from Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV, episode 126, recorded February 23rd, 2026.